Yeah, welcome to the Vol Bros. We are two bros. Wait, I messed up our intro. Welcome to the Vol Bros. We are two bros who are actually bros in real life. There we go. My name is Evan. This is my brother Rustin, the real UT. I like that. I'm actually going to reference that here in a little bit. But what a day, man! And we definitely started today with the football version of our intro because it's time. Like it is now football season. SEC Media Days has happened, so it's football season. That's how this works in the Southeast. Rustin, we're going to talk about Tennessee's appearance at SEC Media Days. We have essentially two topics. What was the biggest takeaway from Heupel, and what was the biggest takeaway from the players? So, what was your biggest takeaway from what Josh Heupel said today?
I thought he just did a really good job all around. I thought he did a great job walking up and immediately addressing the NCAA issues, kind of addressing it in such a way that there wasn't really an opportunity for reporters to ask anything else. So I thought he did a fantastic job with that. And I loved the confidence he exuded. He looked like a coach who knows what he has and has a lot of confidence in what he has, and just really kind of laid out there that he's not worried about this year. He thinks they're in great shape, and he loves where they are on the recruiting trail and the fact that the NCAA issue is done. And I think probably my biggest takeaway of the day was Lane Kiffin started the day criticizing NIL, and Josh Heupel got up and immediately talked about how positive NIL is and how well Tennessee does it and how strongly they're embracing it. And I thought that was a really fascinating moment, because any recruit watching that just heard the head coach at Ole Miss say he hates NIL, and then heard the head coach at Tennessee say, "We love it, we embrace it, we're all about it." It was interesting to watch.
I think that is a fantastic point. Paul Feinbaum was interviewing Heupel later on in the day, and he actually brought that very thing up. And he said, um, we've heard a lot of coaches speak negatively about NIL today, and you have had nothing but positive things to say. Is that because of your collective? Like, what is that? And Heupel said, well, it's like, I guess I'm saying it because as a former player, I wish it had been available to me when I was
Mm-hmm.
So he did a great job answering that. I agree with you. As far as the NCAA stuff, he did a good job of addressing it up front. He didn't run from it. He didn't even wait for it to be asked about it. He addressed it in his opening statement. Um, he did it in such a way to uh, kind of end the discussion. But what was interesting was when he was asked about it later, and he said the easiest thing would have been to just take a bowl ban year one, but that wasn't right. It's not fair to the people who are there now. And so that was interesting. I wonder if the SID and the communications people are like, kind of wish he hadn't said that, but he is correct in that it isn't fair to the literally from the top down. Administration, coaches, they're all gone, and so why punish the people there now for something that previous people had done? That obviously wouldn't be fair. And so I think he did a good job of handling that. My biggest takeaway, though, from Heupel's deal isn't really Heupel. It was the media's way overreaction to his statements. And I'm so glad you put the real UT on as your name tonight because, watching that live, I personally, when he finished it, I was like, oh man, he could have like nailed it way more than that. As far as like that question, I thought he did a tremendous job overall. But I mean, he could have said, we've been a university longer than Texas has been a state. Like he could have said a lot of stuff, and he was so diplomatic about it. And he just and all he said was, "There's only one real UT and one real shade of orange, one right shade of
which
orange."
which was a shot, though,
And
because the guy who asked it was from Orange Bloods. So
ah,
so he made it real clear. Your entire existence is based off of the
yeah,
wrong shade of orange.
yeah. So I mean, but he could have said a whole lot more than he did. And then all these people online, like I can't remember who it was. Somebody tweeted out that picture of him and the quote under it and said, "Savage quote, Josh, savage." And I'm like, come on, man. People are making it into this huge deal. When I thought he was like nice, I thought he could have been way more pointed about it, But I'm glad you put that on there because that is the quote that everybody's going to remember until 2024 when next year at SEC Media Days, they're going to be replaying that on Texas's day. And
but the crazy thing is we don't play them for 2 years.
Yeah, exactly. And so it'll be replayed then too. But kudos to Heupel. That was he inadvertently gave a lot of TV time for Tennessee for years to come just by saying that. But that was my biggest takeaway. Let's see what some folks are saying in the comments here. Wow, this is awesome. We got a bunch of folks joining us here. Rebecca, welcome. Good to see you again. She said Lane was just salty.
Lane was real salty. It was interesting. People were speculating before today how today would go. And everybody was kind of predicting that Lane would actually be really boring and try to fly under the radar because his team's kind of flying under the radar. And Lane just got up there and just started attacking people. It was wild.
Yeah, it was interesting. He kind of looked like maybe he had a late evening the night before. So I'm not sure what was going on there, but that was interesting. Douglas, welcome, buddy. He said Heupel is different. They're definitely comfortable in his own skin. Absolutely. That was really obvious today. You could tell there's a little bit more confidence about how he felt today than in previous times.
Well, and anybody who could show up to media days in an insanely expensive suit with black and white Air Force Ones on, like,
yeah,
what?
Yep. Rebecca said Paul got hit by Lane too. Yeah, he was he had a morning, that's for sure.
Did you see that quote where he called out Paul Feinbaum?
Mm-mm.
He was talking about how everybody gives Nick Saban fodder to get angry about, and he said Paul does it every other year. He sits over there and talks about how Saban's done. This is the end of Saban, and he just pisses him off, and then he comes out here and waxes all of us. And Paul did it again 2 weeks ago.
Yep. Let's see. Mr. Jones said, "Let's go Vols. We know what we're doing. We know we want the players. We want what the players want." Yeah, absolutely. Especially about NIL. And he mentioned that. He said the NIL is about the players, not the coaches anyway. And that, I think the coaches definitely like Tennessee. Yeah. The coaches love Spire Sports. They love because Spire is leading the way nationwide in what a collective can do. And we've seen that repeatedly, even to the point of they were influential in the NCAA's decision to not enforce a bowl ban. I mean, that's incredible. That's incredible.
Even Lane's comments, like, why is Lane salty about NIL? I mean, let's get to the root cause. He's angry about NIL because his collective is terrible. And he's watching guys that he's recruiting get snatched up by everybody else because Ole Miss's collective isn't doing anything.
That's exactly right. Florida's going to already finding themselves in the same boat too.
Yeah. So what he was really doing this morning was he was kind of laying down the gauntlet for his own donors and publicly calling them out, which, can go one of two ways. That can either really pay off for him and the collective can all of a sudden grow, or it could go the other direction. And if he goes 6-6 this year, those will be the same people calling for his head.
Yep, that's exactly right. Mr. Jones said without Tennessee, there would be no Texas. That's exactly correct. And then Doug said, I like how he wants to have a player-driven team and not make it about him like Kiffin seems to. I would also add how Derek Dooley tried to make it more about Derek Dooley than about the player-driven team.
Yeah.
Mr. Jones, he's already lighting it up with the one-liners here. Billy Napier. It didn't make me laugh till I started saying it out loud. Then it made me crack up laughing. Billy Napier. That's right. I don't think it's Billy. I think it's this collective. Billy would love to be Billy, however you want to say Payer. Bill, just Billy Payer. But it's his collective that's holding him back there. I like that, Billy Napier. I like that. What's his face? Jaden Rashada, I think is what his name.
Yep.
He would agree with that.
Yeah. So would his attorney.
Yeah, exactly. And if any Florida fans are watching this or joining us, welcome. We know y'all, we're like some of your best buddies, right? Yeah, them and Mississippi State fans.
Mississippi State loves us.
Yes, they sure do. They sure do. So that was our biggest takeaways from what Coach Heupel said today.
There was one other thing. There was one other thing he said that really stood out to me, and it kind of flew under the radar. I don't think people really caught it, but he kind of tipped his hat to what his roster makeup is going to look like for the foreseeable future. And I found the quote because I wanted to quote him exactly. He said, "The days of having 4 or 5 guys in your quarterback room, those days are gone. That's not realistic anymore." So, everybody had major concern over this year. It's Joe, Nico, and Gaston Moore. And he basically just told us he's going to carry 3 quarterbacks from here on out because you can't get 4 to stay. So, it's going to be really interesting. Yeah, and it's good. So it's going to be really interesting next year because Joe leaves, Gaston Moore leaves, Nico's here, Jake Merklinger comes in. Who's the third? He basically just told us he's going to have to get somebody out of the portal to be that third quarterback. And that's all they're going to ever have is 3. So it's
and you have to have at least 3 because if 2 guys get hurt, I mean, there you go. And at that position, they could get hurt very easily.
And if for no other reason, let's say you do get through a season unscathed, you've got to have 3 for practice. Like you've got to have 3 balls in the air because receivers have to get reps, and 2 guys can't cover it. So but I thought it was really interesting that he basically told the world we're never going to have 4 or 5 quarterbacks anymore. Like it's 3 and that's it.
So Doug just asked a really good question. He said, how big of a jump does the defense make this year? We shaved 6 points off last year's defense. So let's answer the next part first, because my answer to that, our next topic, will lead into Doug's question. So Mr. Jones, he's on fire tonight. I'm loving it. Merklinger, the gunslinger. I love it. Hey, we should make shirts that say that. Except we don't have NIL rights to do that. But if we did, that would be pretty cool. Tennessee needs to do it, the Vol Club. Hey, volunteer club officials, if you're watching this, contact Mr. Jones and sign a deal with him to get that done. That would be obviously. Jody said, obviously they've started paying because Florida is in top 5 in recruiting. I'm a UT fan, by the way. Yes, you are correct. Florida is in the top 5 in recruiting right now. That is accurate. I would be interested to see where they end up in December.
Yeah,
because Florida has an extremely difficult schedule this year. And if they end up going, like, if we say 6-6, that's generous for Florida this year, just because their schedule is not favorable. And so if by some chance that ends up happening, it'll be interesting to see how many of those recruits say, no, thanks. Because the schedule, unfortunately for Florida, next year's schedule is even more difficult. So there could be a 2-year period where Florida didn't even go to a bowl. And so it'll be very, very interesting to see how they end up in December. But I appreciate you saying that, because you're exactly right. Right now they do have a top 5 recruiting class.
I wouldn't put any credence at all in recruiting rankings before October. It's just not realistic, and sometimes it's skewed based on numbers. A couple weeks ago, Missouri was in the top 10, and it was just a numbers game. They just had more people committed, so it boosted their ranking up. Everybody was making a big deal about tomorrow. Edwin Spillman's going to pick Tennessee over Ohio State tomorrow. And everybody was
the hope. That's the hope.
He will. And everybody was making a big deal out of when he signs or when he commits tomorrow, it's going to push Tennessee close to the top 5. It's all just a numbers game. It's not reality. So until you get to about October, none of those rankings are worth anything.
And the reason, that we can say December, people might be saying, well, why not February? Because technically February is still signing day, but not really anymore. Early signing day is signing day now. And the reason that is because of early enrollees. Tennessee had half a bajillion early enrollees this year. And that's the way I'm sure coaches will continue to try to drive that bus with having that early signing day now.
I think they had 3 kids sign on the actual signing day this past year. It wasn't many. It was less than 5.
Yeah, I was about to say it wasn't more than 5. I know that. They had double-digit early enrollees. Almost all of them were early enrollees.
Yeah.
And so, I can think of like 2 off the top of my head that weren't. This, for all intents and purposes, December is now National Signing Day. And so you'll see people between October and December making their final choices and that kind of thing.
The other thing to keep in mind, Butch Jones had a top 5 signing class.
Yeah.
It's easy to have a high signing class when your roster's terrible, because you can go out and guarantee immediate starting to kids that you're actively recruiting to replace your existing roster. So, it's not credible.
Mr. Jones said, Nico, I am a believer. Nice. Very nice. And Doug said, how many do you think we signed this year? I'm thinking around 23 or 24. So I am not sure as to what signing class, I'm assuming it's this one, as to what signing class the scholarship limitations begin to impact. Is it next year or is it this year?
I can't remember when that goes into effect. I believe it's this year, but
the
reality is this year. Those numbers, because of the transfer portal, those numbers are no longer relevant. Like it doesn't matter how many you sign anymore, because you can go in the portal and get everything you need. And that's the other reason recruiting rankings are really starting to, rank the portal, because they know that here pretty soon recruiting rankings are going to be pretty much worthless. There's going to be teams out there that are going to just ignore, let's say you're Rutgers, and in New Jersey next year, there are no recruits that are going to help you. Rutgers recruiting class is going to be really low because they're going to go attack the portal, and they're going to fill all those empty spots with portal kids that can help them. And that's just a hypothetical, but that's what you're going to start seeing. And recruiting rankings are going to become meaningless.
So let's answer that second part, and that's going to lead into Doug's other question. That is a really good question as well. So the second thing from today,
we lost you. Your mic shorted out.
Am I back now?
A little bit.
It's live, folks.
Now we can hear you. That got
I'm back now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, sorry. Apparently, I was talking with my hands and I hit the cord and it pulled the XLR cable out of there a little bit. Well, what was the biggest takeaway from the players? What was your answer? What would be your answer to that?
Man, there was a lot. I thought it was interesting that nobody really talked to Omari Thomas. That seemed to, it was interesting to see that media days as a whole has kind of changed. Everybody's there. This is going to sound terrible. I didn't see a whole lot of journalism happening. I saw a lot of people looking for tweets, and looking for short, quick bursts of things that they could say. And so, like, Joe Milton got a ton of attention because he's Joe Milton and he can talk about, catching rabbits in Pahokee, Florida. and he can talk about throwing a ball 90 plus yards in the air, which he confirmed today. And he probably was asked that 100 times. And so guys like Amari Thomas kind of got ignored because it was like, we don't want to hear about your defensive line depth. We don't want to hear about Rodney Garner. Do you have any cool stories we can tweet? Jacob Warren got a little more attention. But it was mainly because he talked about his high school coach and had a really sweet story about Eddie Courtney from Farragut. And so people kind of latched onto that because it was a human interest kind of thing. I thought the funniest quote of the day, and the one that stood out to me the most, and I'm going to quote this one as well because I don't want to mess up what he said. When Joe Milton was talking about Pahokee, Florida, and he said, "It's not a city, it's a town. Everybody knows everybody. There's a Family Dollar, a Dollar General, a gas station, and then another gas station called Bite Me, but it basically just sells pizza." It's like it was so priceless.
Rabbit catching.
Yeah, and everybody latched onto it because it was just funny. He's saying his hometown has $2 stores and 2 gas stations, but one's not really a gas station. It pretty much just sells pizza.
So my biggest takeaway from the players, I thought it was very interesting. Somebody, I don't know who it was, but I'm glad they were asking those questions because it's the questions that I like to hear. And they asked each player. I didn't get to see Omari Thomas's answer. The video cut off before whoever it was asking it asked it. But they asked who on the opposite side of the ball has caught your attention. And they asked it to, I saw Joe Milton's answer and I saw Jacob Warren's answer. Now, Jacob Warren, first of all, Jacob Warren is the Griffin Merritt of Tennessee football. Griffin Merritt was by far and away the best interview on Tennessee's baseball team this past year. Jacob Warren is by far and away the best interview on Tennessee's football team this year. He's like a Fortune 500 CEO sitting there. He's so comfortable in front of the camera, so comfortable behind the mic. He just does a fantastic job. And so when they asked him that question, he and Joe Milton both, and I think this is tremendously important, and I think that everybody involved in Vol Nation should be incredibly excited about their answer. Both of them mentioned Warren Burrell by name.
Mm-hmm.
When they were asked the question, who has surprised, who's jumped off the page at you, or that kind of thing, who's really caught your eye, both of them mentioned Warren Burrell. Joe mentioned, he's back fully healthy now. That is extremely important for Tennessee football because they need a corner opposite Gabe Jeudy-Lally who can be a shutdown corner. So that is extremely important. Joe Milton also mentioned Tyler Barron. He was the first name out of his mouth. He also mentioned Tank McCullough. He also mentioned Kamal Hadden, which I thought was very interesting. Listen, if Tennessee can get Kamal Hadden, Gabe Jeudy-Lally, Danico Slaughter, and Warren Burrell to all four be playing at a high level, that is tremendous for Tennessee's secondary. That is really, really good news because, let's be honest. We saw what happened last year. At one point, we had 6 defensive backs injured, and we had a walk-on playing in the most important drive of the game at the end of the Alabama game. So it's incredibly important that they have depth back there. And if all 4 of those guys are catching people's eyes and attention, that is huge. But, Doug just said that's surprising about Warren. I agree. That was, and it was a nice thing to hear, wasn't it? I thought that was fantastic that both of them mentioned Warren Burrell by name. That was excellent. The other thing from the players was Omari Thomas is beginning to look like an NFL defensive lineman.
Oh yeah.
Just physically, he looks like, what you would expect to see after an NFL post-game defensive lineman sitting up at the podium. That's what Omari looked like today. And that was really encouraging.
There was one other thing that both Jacob Warren and Joe Milton said that should terrify every other school in the SEC. Both of them, apart from each other, when they were asked the same question, but on the offensive side, both of them said Squirrel White has gotten faster. And Joe Milton took it a step forward and goes, I didn't think he could get faster, but he has. That's crazy. That dude was one of the fastest guys in the entire country last year. So for two of them to say that he has gotten faster is just mind blowing.
So having said that, let's go look at Doug's question from earlier, because Doug asked, how big of a jump does the defense make this year? And I think the answer was kind of given to us a little bit today, because I think there's two things here that will determine how big of a jump Tennessee's defense makes. I'm not concerned about the defensive line. I think they're going to be fine on the defensive line. You got Amari Thomas, Tyler Barron, Omar Norman Lott, and then all the depth that they had. Actually, our defensive line position preview has been our most watched video over the last 28 days, according to our analytics. So people are enjoying that video. So if you haven't seen that, go check that out. Our defensive line, we did a position preview series for every position. For some reason, that defensive line video lately has gone whoo and just really caught people's attention. But I think the thing that, and this sounds like so cheap and that kind of stuff, but honestly, the thing that's going to determine how good Tennessee's defense is this year is Aaron Beasley and Keenan Peely not getting hurt.
Yeah.
That's the thing that will determine. It is incredibly encouraging to hear that Warren Burrell and Kamal Hadden are making huge strides. That's very encouraging because Tennessee secondary needed to make huge strides. So that's a big deal. Joe Milton called Christian Charles a dog today. He said he's a dog. Which was a huge compliment to Christian Charles. They need that in the secondary. So that's huge. That's a big deal. But if Aaron Beasley or Keenan Peely gets hurt, that's trouble. And so
it was good to hear. And
health.
Again, talking about those position previews, if you go back and watch our linebacker preview, we talk a lot about Arion Carter and Jeremiah Thielander. And I felt like Thielander was a little bit underrated and that he was somebody who could give them some immediate snaps. It's been good to hear recently. A lot of people around the program are talking a lot about those two guys. They're very excited about Arion Carter and Jeremiah Thielander. If they can develop quickly and become really good, serviceable backups as true freshmen, it helps a little bit. But they're never going to be this year Aaron Beasley or Keenan Peely. So,
right.
It's great that they are getting better, and it's great that they're going to be able to give us some rest snaps, but we sure don't want to have to depend on them this year.
Yeah, Keenan Peely and Aaron Beasley are very valuable commodities on the defensive side of the ball right now, and they're really good too, which is also nice.
We run a 4-2-5 defense, and Florida is running the 4-2-5 now. And I heard a guy interviewed a couple of days ago about Florida's defense, and he made a comment that is very true. He said, if you better have 9 guys in the secondary that you can depend on, and they better be interchangeable. When he said that, I started thinking about our secondary, and I was a little concerned because, at the corners, we have Danico Slaughter, Kamal Hadden, Gabe Judy-Lawley, Warren Burrell. At the star, we have Tamarian McDonald. Danico can slide in and play the star also. So that's five dudes there. At safety, we've got Walker and Tank McCullough. So that's 6-7.
Yeah.
Brandon Turnage
Charles
and Brandon Turnage Yeah, Christian Charles and Brandon Turnage need to have big years if we're going to have 9 guys back there that we're comfortable with.
Yeah, agreed. Butch, let's see. Doug said Butch had 30 recruits, but the average player rating was around 89.
That was
Jody,
the year he could only have 25, and everybody was getting blue shirts and red shirts, and
Yeah.
they were getting real creative.
Jody said we're also going to have to be shaving off 2 scholarships for the next 5 years. Yep, that's right. Let's see. Doug said, "Do you think this is a make or break year for? Is that Coach Will Muschamp? Is that who?
Willie Martinez.
Oh, okay, yeah, that makes more sense because it's a Tennessee show and everything. So Willie Martinez, since he didn't get a contract extension,
I don't know that it's a make or break year. I don't think he got a contract extension because they're not sure if he's retiring. So I think it was a wait and see thing where they're trying to figure out how much longer he's going to coach, and then they'll determine what his extension is off of that. Willie Martinez is not under fire. Willie Martinez is an excellent defensive backs coach. He just hadn't had a whole lot to work with. And we're getting better there. And, some of that can come through the portal. Some of that can come through recruiting. The current freshman class of corners are big time players. That's not a position you want to play a freshman. So, it's good for them to redshirt. It's good for them to come along and develop properly. But Willie Martinez is not under fire and not on the hot seat or anything else like that.
The barometer I always use for Willie Martinez is look what he did with Emmanuel Mosley.
Yeah.
He took a guy that literally was just fast. Like that was Emmanuel's his whole skill set coming out of high school. He was incredibly fast. And in high school, they would run sweeps with him and stuff like that on offense, like give the ball to that guy and just let him go run. And that's what, and Martinez took him and turned him into an NFL defensive back. So,
and look at the DBs we're recruiting. I mean, we're in on some of the top high school defensive backs in America. Those kids know Willie Martinez knows his stuff. Look at Alontae Taylor. Taylor in 1 year went from kind of undraftable, maybe an undrafted free agent, to a legit pick and playing a ton of snaps as a rookie in the NFL.
Yeah, absolutely. Mr. Jones said Heupel staff has been great at player development. 100%. Yes.
Yeah. Times 1,000.
Yeah, absolutely. Mr. Jones, you are exactly right on that take. That is on the money.
So that was something else that Joe Milton said today that was really interesting. He was asked about the fact that he has no interceptions yet. And he said,
I loved this quote.
He said, that's not me. That's our coaches always putting me in the right situations.
I loved it when he said that. It was Jimmy Himes asking him the question. And Jimmy asked him, he's like, trying to get Joe to brag on himself. And he said, does that, he asked him, how many interceptions have you had since whenever? And Joe said, 0. And he goes, does that say, what does that say about you taking care of the ball and that kind of stuff? And he said, it doesn't say anything about me. It says that my coaches are putting me in the right spots. and I was like, what an awesome quote. I mean, that is fantastic.
He also, a little bit later, was asked about the transition from Alex Golesh to Joey Halzle. And he said, it doesn't matter who the offensive coordinator is. This is Coach Heupel's offense, and we will do what he wants.
Yeah. Yep. I liked it when somebody asked him, he was like, what's your favorite thing about this offense? And he goes, scoring. He goes, I've never scored this fast in my life. I mean, it's like 30 seconds and you're in the end zone. Pretty cool. Mr. Jones said, Heupel said they can be elite. I believe him 100%. I mean, look at what they did last year. And that was without the talent that they're bringing in now. So as they get more and more talent in, what are they going to be able to, when Nico and Matthews and hopefully Jefferson are all in the field at the same time, it's going to be a show, man. Like when the Rams were the greatest show on turf, that's what we're going to be like. You know, he's going to be up and down the field. It's going to be awesome. Throwing the thing, to quote Steve Spurrier on here, but to quote, throw the ball around the yard a little bit. They're going to be fun to watch. He said, I wonder how Christian Harrison's coming along. Yeah, that's a great question. They need him to come along. There's a couple young guys that they need. And you're right, he is Rodney Harrison's son. That's exactly right. Yeah, about it. So, yep. Knock on wood about Milton not throwing a 90. Yeah. I was thinking the same thing when he said that. I was like, man, I hope he doesn't come out like first game now. Okay, side note, how funny was that some guy some Virginia fan tweeted out a couple days ago, like, Virginia's coming into Neyland Stadium and they're going to give the Vols a loss to start the season. I was like, they ain't played in Neyland Stadium, buddy.
He's going to hate the tailgating that day.
Yeah, absolutely. That even Virginia fans are now classifying Nissan Stadium as Neyland West, I guess. Doug said, do you think our pass rush is going to be better this year? That's a good question because, they lose. I just had a totally mental blank.
They lost Byron Young.
Byron Young. I was like, he wore number 6. They lost Byron Young to the LA Rams. They do still have Joshua Josephs, who is a tremendous pass rusher. They still have Tyler Barron, who's an excellent pass rusher. And Omari Thomas, if you go back and you watch last season, from the beginning of the season and the end of the season, Omari Thomas was in the backfield way more in the second half of the season than he was in the first half. And so I think that the pass rush from the defensive line, you add an Omar Norman Lott on there, who is a very highly sought after defensive line transfer. I think our defense, I said offensive line a minute ago, didn't I? I think our defensive line is going to be just fine as far as the pass rush. What's really going to tick a lot of quarterbacks off is when Aaron Beasley comes flying off somebody's hip and they don't see him like he did it all day long in the Orange Bowl. Aaron Beasley has to be loving the fact that the defensive line is probably going to be improved. He's got to be loving that because that just means there's going to be even more open lanes for him to get after the quarterback. And I'll go back to one thing that Rustin said a few months ago in one of our position preview videos. Somebody asked Keenan Peely what's different about BYU's defense and Tennessee's, and he said this is way more aggressive. So he knows they're going to be getting after the quarterback. So Aaron Beasley, we should set like a over under on Aaron Beasley getting like 15.5 sacks or something this year and see, if it's over or under. I might even take the over on that because they're going to be letting him fly all over the place.
It's going to be interesting to see how they can disguise coverage because, the pass rush will improve the more man we play. I mean, that's what it comes down to. There's a fundamental defensive principle that has to be in place. Last year we sent a lot of 4-man rush because everybody was dropping in zones. When you play more man, you can send more guys. And so you can get a little more exotic with your stunts. You can get a little more exotic with who you're sending and where you're sending them from. Tamarian McDonald is not a good man defender. So it'll be interesting to see if they can teach him to be a good man defender or if we see a lot more Danico Slaughter sliding inside to the star with Warren Burrell and Gabe Judy Lawley at the corners. So those three can all be out there at the same time and play more man-to-man so they can send more exotic blitzes.
One other thing I thought about when Mr. Jones's comment that they're great at player development. So that was actually brought up on SEC Network today when they were off, no teams were on the podium at the time. And it was, who all was sitting there? Roman Harper was sitting there. Greg McElroy was sitting there. And I think Chris Doering and Alyssa Lang, those 4 of them were there. And it was brought up. They started talking about Joe Milton and the fact that he didn't leave. He didn't transfer. He stayed. And they were talking about how he was asked, why did you stay? And one of the first things he said was, I felt like I was getting better here. Even though he wasn't playing at the time, he knew he was getting better, and so he stayed. And that's a direct compliment to the coaching staff, Halsey and Heupel and Golish. I mean, he was getting better, so he stayed. And that's primarily due to Halsey and Heupel.
Doug, I want to respond to a comment Doug had. He said that makes sense. I didn't know he was thinking about retiring. I'm not saying Willie Martinez is retiring this year. I'm saying it's coming in the near future. And they did not want to have a conversation about an extension until after the season when he feels better about really having clarity around, okay, how much longer am I going to do this? And think about it this way: the man's 60 years old and he coaches one of the most athletic positions on the field. It's hard to run around and demonstrate technique to 18 and 19-year-olds when you're 60, 61, 62 in a position where you've got to be really engaged and really hands-on and very active. So I think at the end of this season, they'll sit down, they'll talk through what's he feeling like, how much longer is he feeling. I wouldn't be surprised if you see a defensive quality control person come in this year at some point. Maybe at the end of the year, they announce a defensive analyst who, coaches DBs. I would say that extension is probably going to be a little shorter than maybe a longer term extension. I think as soon as they find the guy that they feel like is his succession plan, then they'll know how long that extension needs to be. Keep an eye on Rodney Garner also. Robert Ayers is now the defensive quality control for defensive line. That was clearly a succession plan. He's spending a lot of time with Rodney Garner, learning how Rodney Garner teaches. He had a great NFL career, so he's learned from some great defensive line coaches there. That is clearly the long-term plan for when Rodney Garner decides he's retiring. Robert Ayers is going to be our defensive line coach.
Yeah, I think you're right on the money there. Let's see. Doug said, did not see Aaron Beasley having the year he did last year. He got better as the year went on. Now that's being coached up. Great job by Brian G. Marie. Yeah, absolutely. He was, his last couple of games of the season were like, who is this guy? The Orange Bowl game. Good night. He was must see TV, during the Orange Bowl. It was incredible. Mr. Jones said, I think the Mike Matthews commit is going to start a chain reaction of big time pickups down the stretch. Totally agree. I hope it starts tomorrow. If they get Edwin Spillman at linebacker, that's a huge pickup. When you got him coming right in behind Arian Carter and Jeremiah Thielander. Let's see. He said Matthews is going to be working on, and yeah, absolutely. He said Matthews is going to be working on some of these 4 or 5 stars now that he is on board 100%. I mean, they all want to win, they all want to win championships. And so they know they got to work together to pull some of these guys. And once again, we cannot say enough about Spire Sports and what they have done for Tennessee athletics. It has been a huge, huge deal. Tennessee has been on the forefront of NIL since day one. Ooh, excuse me. I like one of the just simple things like every player they like as soon as that NIL deal went down and became legal that day, Tennessee announced that there was going to be an entrepreneurship minor for all their student athletes. Genius idea. Genius idea. Doug said, I think they hired a guy that coached at the Saints last year that coached defensive backs. And then Mr. Jones said, Amari Jefferson come on to Tennessee. I mean, if they get Amari Jefferson combined with Mike Matthews, that's a pretty good receiver class right there. That's an understatement of the century. And, Rustin was talking about, and Doug just mentioned the guy from the Saints. Rustin was talking about quality control coaches and analysts and that kind of stuff. How interesting is it that at Texas A&M, where you got Jimbo Fisher and Bobby Petrino, good old Jim Chaney is now an offensive analyst.
That was Texas so weird.
A&M. I think it is too, because I mean that's a really incredibly offensive minded room there. But how in the world are those three minds going to all get along and come up with the same, plan that they feel like work? That's going to be fascinating. It's either going to be like an genius thing or explosion. One of the three.
That I was like truly stunned when they announced that. That was just so bizarre, and yeah, that one's going to be interesting to watch unfold.
Yep. Mr. Jones said Nico could be the reason we get Amari Jefferson. Nico could be the reason why we get pretty much any wide receiver they want to get after right now, because they know they got. I mean, here's the deal: if you're a receiver, you have your eyes on the NFL. The most other important person on the team is the quarterback, because you ain't getting the ball unless he throws it to you, and he's got to be able to get it to you. And so having Nico and then Merklinger, I mean, that's a good setup for us. They know they're going to be getting the ball, and they know Heupel can get them the ball. So, well, we really appreciate everybody joining us. This has been fun. Well, it's good to be back. It's been a few days since we've been on here, so we're super excited. We're over 1,000 subscribers now, so that's awesome. If you haven't yet subscribed, we invite you to. We try to go live at least once a week. So we went live tonight because of Tennessee's day at SEC Media Day. So we're super excited that fall camp is literally right around the corner now. It is going to be football time in Tennessee before we know it. Doug Graham said A&M is running an outdated offense, but Jimbo is stubborn, and I don't see him changing. I mean, that's fair. It'll be interesting to see what happens this year. Mr. Jones said Milton is showing Nico how to throw 100 yards. Yeah, probably. A lot, actually, every day. Were you going to say something, Rustin?
Yeah, I was just going to confirm what Doug said. They did hire Corey Robinson. He was the assistant DB's coach for the Saints for the last 3 years. So I would keep an eye on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
That could mean that Willie Martinez has a secession plan in place.
Yep. Well, it's football time in Tennessee. I mean, today starts it. Media days is the unofficial beginning of the season. So 44 days away. It's going to be here before we know it. Because once fall camp starts, then we're seeing all the videos from practice every day. And, it just feels like it's happening because it is, because it's fall camp. So super excited for football to roll around. Man, oh, man, it's going to be an awesome year to be of all. Super excited to see the offensive production, because good night, they've got playmakers all over the place. It's going to be so much fun to watch. So we hope everybody has a wonderful evening. We will see everybody very soon. Thank you all so much for subscribing, pushing us over the 1,000 mark. That was super awesome, super exciting. It's a fun time. Mr. Jones said the sleeping giant is awake. Yes, it is. Tennessee football is on the map right now to be here for a long time. And you got to give credit to the administration and Josh Heupel.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they've done a tremendous job. Doug said, you guys do a great job. Love the conversation. Hey, we really appreciate that, Doug. Thank you so much. We love it when people join us and comment, and we thank you for your awesome questions this evening. So we appreciate that, Doug, very, very much. It's a lot of fun, and it's a good time to be a Vols fan, that's for sure. And so we look forward to seeing everybody very soon. And I hope everybody has a great evening. And go Vols.